So welcome to Worship Conversations from Audacious Worship. This week, I, Matt Hill, am joined by Jay Cook. Jay, welcome. Great to see you.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jay is the worship pastor of Hillsong UK, and so we're really privileged to have him in the conversation today. Jay, thanks so much for joining us. It's brilliant, and it's amazing that we're in this kind of crazy lockdown time, but it gives us the opportunity to maybe sit down and have a chat with you when otherwise you would be crazy, maybe more crazy busy, or I don't know, maybe you're more busy now than normal.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Probably not in the country would be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, true. So, just can you give us a bit of a background, Jade? Like for those of us who are, maybe never heard of you before, or we've seen you a little bit on the internet, on TV, Hillsong videos and things like that. But can you remember a point in your life when you just knew, this is what I want to do? Maybe it was when you first sort of got into music, or maybe when you first heard the call of God on your life.
Yeah, I've done music my whole life. Kind of grew up as a kid, just kind of playing instruments and pick up instruments and start to learn them. And so I'm a pastor's kid. My parents are pastors, just grown up in church. And I remember getting to a point it was really kind of early teens, and I loved church, absolutely loved music, and was really kind of wrestling, thinking about the future, just really wrestling with, I knew I wanted to do music. I knew it had to be music that I was kind of doing, and really kind of wrestling, okay, what did that look like? Did that mean kind of being part of a band, and kind of just touring and doing the whole band thing? Or was it actually church? And at that point I was like, really, I guess I didn't know. But I knew it had to be something around music. And I remember when I think I must have been about 16. My brother had moved to London, and he actually became part of Hillsong Church here in London. It was maybe 200 people meeting in a university lecture hall, and I came down to visit. And there was, from that first Sunday, just kind of being in there, there was something that kind of just changed in me. I was just like, I guess for me, I hadn't experienced church in that way, and grown up in an amazing environment, but it was just such a different way of church for me. And it's almost like I fell in love with church again. It wasn't necessarily about my relationship with God, but it was actually the church that there was just like reignition, this fire kind of that rebirthed in me. And I think over that time, probably over about an 18-month period, I wasn't living in London at that point. I was living up in the northeast of England with my parents, was doing music at college, and would just come down to visit my brother, and would just be at church every weekend. Eventually to the point where I was kind of almost so much part of the furniture, even though I wasn't in London. I'd play guitar on Sundays when I'd come down, because it just became family and part of the team. And it was kind of at that point, I really felt like that was kind of what God was kind of calling me into. He was calling me into ministry in that sense, and not pursue music elsewhere. And I guess I'd found I could see everything that I wanted to be part of and wanted to grow up in within that environment, and being part of the church. And so that it was really kind of that period. And then over the time, I kind of had to make the decision, obviously, to move to London. I kind of came down. I did start doing music at university, and just really, really got plugged into church as much as I could. Was just like volunteering every spare minute and hour that I could. We had a choir then, and I was kind of calling up the choir during the week, just trying to make sure everyone was available. Going to the office, I had a job where I could work really early in the morning, that would be finished early afternoon, and then I'd just go into the church office and just kind of help out with whatever needed helping with. And and it was just that whole time I was like, okay, this is where my heart is. But it was kind of these two worlds for me met. It was like I got to do the thing that I loved, which was music, and I got to do my other thing that I loved as well, which is church. Is these two worlds which met for me, and I was like, this is like, it's such a cliche, but it was living the dream, and it was unbelievable. And that was, so I've been on staff at Hillsong for 16 years now. 16 years. I started when I was 20. So it's actually I'm 36 today.
Oh,
it's my birthday today. So so I've been on 16 years. And I get the pleasure of talking to you, Matt, which is amazing.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's amazing. And so you have been part of Hillsong London then since it was very small, really.
Yeah. It's literally like 200 people. And just kind of being part of that journey, part of that period of time. And I think now we have quite a few locations around the UK, kind of just it's spread out of London. So I think we have 13 or 14 locations that in the UK that I guess as a worship pastor that I kind of responsibility for in terms of what we're doing with worship across our church in the UK. Yeah.
And I think probably in this day and age, being in any job for 16 years is pretty impressive, let alone sticking it out working for church. So how have you, I assume it's not all been plain sailing. I'm just guessing.
It's been easy. Every day's been easy.
It's just wonderful. So how have you managed to sort of keep that consistency? Because you are one of those people who I would look at and just be like, you know what, Jay is just a church builder, consistent, solid and reliable over all these years. It's like, Jay's going to be, just there, giving it all, doing it excellently. But how have you personally managed to sort of keep that consistency and that passion strong and fresh over all those years?
Well, first, that's really kind, Matt. It definitely doesn't always feel like that, but I mean, 16 years, you go through a lot of seasons in that time, incredible seasons and tough seasons, whether it's tough seasons within church, tough seasons personally, that we've had to deal with as a family when it comes to just various things. And so there's so many different things. It's not like a plain sailing journey. And I think it's because I feel like it's really easy. Life is really easy when things are going great. And you almost don't, you kind of forget you still have to rely on God sometimes through those good times. But it's when the tougher times really kick in that actually you're reminded of God's faithfulness and really have to rely and dig into what you believe and what you have faith in. And that's where the rubber hits the road, like when it comes to your faith, because it's actually really put to the test. And it's like, okay, well, I say I believe this, but is that is that a reality in this time right now? Because if it's not in this time right now, then I'm being a joke. I'm just kind of, all I'm doing is living for the good times. And when things get a bit tough, then I'm out of here. Sorry, nothing is true. But we all go through the tough seasons, and for me, I've seen God come through year in, year out, whether things are going good or whether things aren't going good. And as the years have gone on, what's really interesting is every time you come to a tough season, you kind of I have to remind myself of what God has already done before, for the previous times that he's brought me through, and just kind of remember what he has done, remember his faithfulness. And so for me, that has actually been one of the huge things, is actually forcing myself to remember what God has done in the past. And if he's brought me through seasons, then there is no reason why he wouldn't do it again today in whatever season I'm in now. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing it does, it gives you a hope for, okay, cool. I might be in a great season now, but it's not going to last forever. There's going to be a tough season that comes, and it kind of just gives you hope for the future as well. So whatever you do face, whatever is going to come your way, that actually there's this strength that's kind of building up within you, like a resolve that actually, yeah, God has been faithful in the past. He's faithful now, and he's still going to be faithful in the future, whatever we're going through, whatever we're facing. So I'd say that's one thing. And then the other thing I'd say is really the whole offense thing. Because we can easily think that because we're serving in church or we work for church, whatever we're doing, that church is this perfect environment. And the reality is it's not a perfect environment, because no one in the church is perfect. And so you're always dealing with people's flaws, and people are dealing with your flaws. And so it's easy to look at everyone else's flaws but ignore your own. Yeah. And I think the big thing for me that I've learned over the years is, because it's easy to say don't get offended, which sounds actually really nice, but I don't think it's actually true. I think the truest statement is to deal with the offense when it comes, because you will get offended. Yeah. But you have to make the choice to deal with it. And that's been a huge thing, to kind of, again, just build that resolve in, I'm going to get offended. There's an opportunity every day to get offended at something. But have that resolve to actually, no, I'm going to deal with it. And you can deal with it with a few different ways. Obviously, you need to take things to God. And sometimes you just need to talk things through with a good mate who's not gonna feed that what you're going through, but is actually going to kind of pull you through it. Yeah. So I think being really careful kind of who we kind of talk to about these things, I think, and actually just having those people around you they're not going to let you sit and stew in whatever you're going through, but they're going to point you to the next thing to get you through it. Yeah. And so I think they're probably like the two big things for me in terms of kind of, I guess, being around for that time.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And Hillsong is just, I mean, it's a phenomena. It's a miracle at work that we're all, watching and just thanking God for. It's incredible. And I've had the privilege of visiting a few Hillsong locations around the world. And what I think is amazing that I've just observed is that, you can walk into Hillsong South Africa and Hillsong in Buenos Aires, Hillsong London, and you straight away know you're in Hillsong. Like it feels the same. Although there are cultural differences and people talking different languages, but there is that sort of sense of, oh yeah, I'm at home, I'm in Hillsong, because there's such a strong culture that has been able to be built like all across the world, which I think is unbelievable. As well as that, so you are sort of a custodian of that culture, I guess, in London and for the rest of the UK. What has been sort of a bonus, like what has been easy about that, and what has been actually hard? Because I imagine sometimes it's not just, oh yeah, great, we have the best songs in the world coming in, so we can just learn them, great. There's this strong culture of we know exactly who we are, what we believe, etc., etc. But I guess sometimes there must be things which you guys feel are happening in London which maybe aren't happening in Sydney. And how do you sort of keep your own fresh perspective, but with that really strong model coming in from Sydney?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things is that there isn't like a list of 10 things to to being a Hillsong church, which is, and we talk about it a lot, but we do think it's the spirit of it, and that's why like you're talking about, there's all these churches Hillsong churches across the world now, and they each have their own flavor. You walk in and it's Hillsong. The stage might look different. There's going to be there's so many things which can be different about our locations, but there's a spirit and I guess a DNA that kind of permeates through the whole thing, which people carry. It's not, you're not kind of looking at a list going, oh yeah, we've done that, so we're Hillsong, we've done that with Hillsong, which is kind of, I think, part of the beauty of being part of it as well. But then also sometimes the hard thing as well is the very same thing, that there isn't a list of things going, this is what makes Hillsong. You kind of, you're discovering it, and the longer you stick around, the longer you grab hold of what, I guess, who we are as a church, and that comes through Pastor Brian, who leads Hillsong globally, and then through the senior leadership in each location, and we get to carry that as well as leaders, and it's always a journey, and things change over time as well. So there's a spirit of which we carry, but then how we do things might change. So just because we did something in a certain way a few years ago doesn't mean that's how we're doing it now, because that isn't what makes Hillsong. It's not the method of what we do. That's why the sound of worship evolves over time, because the sound isn't what we're holding tight to. We're holding tight to the message of Jesus, and that's kind of what we carry, and everything around that it can change and it can evolve, and over time according to what the needs are within the church, the needs in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And talking of change, obviously we are in a period of change where I guess maybe we can see the light at the end of the tunnel now in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, and our variation of lockdown is starting to change. There's potential, I guess, in the future of we can see when maybe we're allowed to meet again, maybe in smaller numbers. But obviously, how have you guys dealt with all of a sudden what we were used to doing, which is meeting together in large gatherings of people, like every Sunday, multiple services. You're probably traveling around to not just different towns in the UK, but also different countries. And then all of a sudden, you're not allowed to leave your house. So how have you sort of dealt with the change with your team and with your ministry of what you've had to do as church? In such a short period of time, all of a sudden you've got to make a big change. How have you guys dealt with that?
I think, there's been some things which have been, I would say, been easy to adjust to, and then there's some things which have been a really huge learning curve and maybe harder to adjust to. And I remember when we did our last Sunday together, and I think we all thought it would just be maybe a month, couple of weeks, and then we kind of be back all together. And obviously that isn't the case and hasn't been the case. And like you're saying, even now it's still very incremental and kind of what that's going to look like in the future. And so I think learning how to do church online has been a huge learning curve, and how to make it just still kind of create those God moments, and it not just be something that's kind of people can watch, but actually, people can sit in their living rooms or wherever they watch it and actually still get a sense of the presence of God, and through the word, through the worship. And it's been a huge learning curve. And we've got there's so many mistakes that we've made, and we're still learning. We're still very much learning of kind of what it means and how to do it. And I think within the team, it's what's really interesting. It's literally 1 week you're doing like so much, and then the next week the team is down to just a handful of people that are really kind of creating the service and involved in what we're doing online. So there's the majority of the team at the moment are not actively like playing or singing. And so even that is just like, we really took stock of, okay, what we can't do what we were doing, but we have time to do this. And so we really, for us as a team, we really poured our attention into building community and groups. And there was community, there was groups happening, but we now really had time to make that a huge priority, because obviously we're not rehearsing, we're not doing gathering together as a team during the week. So, but we still want to keep momentum happening within the team. So, we literally got everyone on the team, broke them down into connect groups that are still meeting every week, and really trying to keep people connected. Because that's the thing. I think over this time, it's really easy for people to kind of fall through the cracks unless you kind of really fill in the cracks. And we've had to be really purposeful about that in how we go about that. And so that's been like a huge thing for us. And then we kind of, once that has settled in, kind of got all that up in place, we then thought, okay, cool. Now we can, now that we know this is going to go on a bit longer, okay, what are we actually doing now to still keep upskilling the team and still keep them trained, so that when we do go back into whatever scenario it is, that people are actually going back better than having regressed over this time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of really, it was almost like a two-phase thing. The first was really, okay, let's really focus on groups, the community, the connection within the team, because people are now they're not using what they joined team to do.
Yeah.
And so even that, it can just play on people's minds. And so just trying to kind of help people through that and really stay connected that, this is happening right now, but this is a season and it's actually not going to last forever. So what are we doing? What are we personally doing to actually get better over this time? What are the things that we can get better at, so that when we do come back, we're actually better at what we do? And so now we're kind of just got all these like online trainings that we're kind of doing for all these different for different levels, because the team is so broad as well. So we've got people who've been around for ages, or people who are really skilled, and then people who are at the more beginner stage of what they do in their craft.
Yeah.
So there's actually such a wide variety of things to kind of draw people into. And so we've just kind of been looking at all of that stuff, of kind of just making sure people are connected, but people are still kind of upskilling and sharpening their tool over the time.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's very easy to sort of forget those who are on maybe some of the edges of the team. They were just getting involved, and then we went into lockdown. It's easy to sort of forget that those guys were just showing an interest or just starting to meet people, and then all of a sudden there's nothing for them. And we're all getting really, full of, how are we going to make church work for Sunday? And then it's easy to forget the team. So yeah, it was really, really cool hearing that sort of as a reminder, even to me, that's so important. I mean, personally, our life group has actually thrived in this time. It's really weird. Like, we have a life group that's full of people who are self-employed and or musicians. So we're quite often not all in the same city, and all of a sudden, doing meetings online like this is actually brilliant for those sorts of people. And so it's made us think, perhaps we could use this more, even when we don't have to, when we're not forced to. We need to use this more, because sometimes people have like a 15-20 minute window somewhere, which doesn't give them enough time to travel to meet up in person, but it does give you enough time to quickly connect, have a chat, find out where they're at, and keep that consistency of relationship going. So I think we're learning things via using technology because we've been forced to, that I think we're going to continue with after this, which hopefully is just going to help us build the team,
Yeah, it's definitely brought a new way of doing things that, like you're saying, we're forced into a situation, but there's actually so many things, even as we come through this and out of it, that I think are great to kind of keep doing. And even for us, because we're so spread out, that physically gathering all our team in one place, it's not doable anyway, even before lockdown. But then the fact that now we're actually able to kind of still gather our team together across the UK over Zoom and still do stuff has been, it's like, why weren't we doing this beforehand anyway? So
no, it's good. Can I ask you a bit about your relationship with Pastor Gary, because I think this has come up in a few of these conversations I've had, and I think sometimes people have asked me, like maybe if they're in, we have the privilege of being employed as worship pastors, so we have more time to give to it and all that sort of thing. I've had a lot of people who ask the question, they are working a full-time job and then they're also trying to lead their team in their church, and they're probably also, there's only a few people, so they're on every Sunday and things like this, and I guess they would look at churches like ours and be like, wow, how do you get to do that, etc. And I've always sort of tried to push the fact that your relationship with your senior pastor and your leadership team is really, really important, and to understand what it is that is their vision and what is their heart, and be able to know that through and through, so that what we're then implementing in the worship department is part of that DNA that you've already talked about. In your situation, and obviously you've known Pastor Gary for years and years, but also you've got a senior leadership team who are on the other side of the world. How does that sort of work for you, and how do you keep that? I don't really know what Gary's like. I know that Glyn, our pastor, is very, very on it in terms of, if he doesn't like a song, he doesn't like a song, and you know about it straight away. And you're probably not going to be doing that song again.
We live in similar worlds, I think.
Okay. Because some I know that some people are like, oh yeah, the vicar or the pastor, they're not bothered. They just let us do music because they're just not musical. I mean, Glyn is very musical, and he has very clear opinions about music, and when we get it right, he loves it, and when we get it wrong, he lets us know. But how do you, you've gone from being there early 20s, and there's all the passion and the youth and the energy, and I just want to be involved and all that sort of thing, and moving to now when you've got a bit more experience, a bit more maturity. How would you say that your relationship with Gary has developed, and the understanding between you of what you're building together?
Yeah, I think over that time there's been a huge amount of trust built, and I think trust is a massive thing when it comes to with working with leadership, and I think as we actually have to lean into what they're doing. It's kind of, if you take personal responsibility of making sure you're around, making sure you're just being in the know with kind of what's happening without kind of doing that in the right sense, and trusting them, trusting what God has put on their life, trusting the decisions that they make, even when you don't always understand what they're trying to do, or whether you have your own opinion, whether that's the right decision or not. It doesn't always matter, but it's actually trusting their leadership, and actually supporting them, being behind them. But really, I think time is something that it's hard to shortcut and bypass, in terms of just the the trust that is built over time. And I think I would say for me and Gary, we're at a point in our, how we work together, and which has been, he's actually known me since I was like a young kid.
Right.
And so there's a lot in the bank when it comes to that relational capital.
Yeah.
So, and because of that, there's conversations that we can have that we couldn't have had without that relational capital.
Yeah.
He can have like frank, honest conversation with me, knowing that there's nothing personal about what he's saying, but it's just about what we're trying to achieve and how things can be done better, or if we're not going in the right direction. And then I've just to make the choice that whatever he's saying is, I can't take that personally. But it's really about that relational capital. And we can have disagreements about stuff. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna kind of submit to whatever decision that he wants to make. But if he asks my opinion on something, I'll tell him what I think about something, and not always just if that is something different to what he thinks. There's so much relational capital there to be able to have those conversations about different things. But you can't get to that point without putting into the relationship. And so I would say just putting into building that relational capital is hugely important. And I would just say, take it upon yourself to build into that relational capital, to build the trust, to build the friendship there, to build that working relationship, and really kind of, and then I think there's actually so much release, and so much freedom within that. Like you're talking about, Glenn will let you know kind of when he doesn't like something. And so often we can feel like when these kind of things come in, it just feels like it's like another wall, another box that's kind of we're being put in. But, one thing I'm always reminded of is, there's limitations to what we do, because maybe there's a vision about how we're going to do in something. But just because there's walls and parameters doesn't mean there's a roof over what we're doing. So we can kind of stay within these parameters, but we can still go as high as we can within these parameters. And so it's not a box. It's just, this is what we need to work within and do the best that we can within that, and just go as high as we can. And so there's always frustrating times, and trying to figure out maybe what the right decision is sometimes. But I think it is really about building relational capital with your senior leadership. Yeah,
that's great. And as can you tell us a bit about your team structure? Because I think it's fairly consistent that most sort of creative types don't really necessarily love spreadsheets and rotas and all that sort of thing. And some people love the sort of pastoral side and the team vibe, but some people are quite, like me, I kind of like 5 people, but above 5, then that's just too many, So it's like, I love being in a band and I love that sort of dynamic. But as soon as you have a team of 50 people or whatever, then it's like, oh, too many people. So how do you guys sort of structure your team leadership so that's working well?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved over time, and it evolves because of where you're at as a church, and it evolves because of growth of a church, growth of a team. So we've had to put different things in place as the church has grown, as the team has grown, as we add more services and add more locations. So it's always this constantly evolving thing. But where we're at now, so I mentioned earlier, we have about 14 locations. So for each one of those locations, there's essentially a worship pastor, someone who's responsible for the team locally.
Yeah,
they're responsible for building the team, for upskilling it, for pastoring it. They're responsible for the worship on a Sunday, because obviously I can't be in 14 different places at one time. So I work with those guys and work to empower them and lead them so that they can lead their teams to the best that they can. And majority of the guys are, like we talked about, they're volunteers. They have full-time jobs. They're working a full-time job. They're trying to do all this stuff as a volunteer to keep church going and move it forward. So it's not like we have a couple of staff within the worship department, but majority are all volunteers. So it's even just making sure we're kind of working around their schedule as well when it comes to putting meetings in, and not just the schedule of a full-time church staff member.
Sure.
So really trying to, I guess, because we're there to serve as leaders, we're there to serve. So it's kind of, it's not always what's best for me, but it's actually how can we make it work for the guys who are giving up time to do this and lead. So that's kind of really the structure. And then I have a couple of staff that lead, kind of have oversight within certain areas of the team, but their role is more to resource from a central, almost a central point that resources all the locations. So kind of work within that structure. And then each location has the same structure. So they'll have someone who oversees musicians, someone who oversees vocals, someone who oversees like the pastoral side, and someone who is responsible for building new people into team.
Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of the leadership structure within each location.
Right. Okay. And how much it is in terms of like song bank and set lists and things like that, Sunday services, how much of that is sort of created by you guys centrally, and how much are the locations responsible for?
Yeah, again, it's seasonal, and we've gone through times where I'll create a set list that then everywhere will do, and then before lockdown, we were, locations were doing their own set list within, but there'd be like a pool of songs. Okay, this month, this is the pool of songs that we're using. Okay. Choose within this, and then everyone will put their set list together. I'll kind of see that before the weekend. If I feel like there was any kind of changes that would need to be made, I'd kind of explain why. So it's seasonal, but trying to empower, when we've done it where I would kind of do the set list, it's more just to try and get everyone on the same page for a season. Yeah. This is kind of where we're going, and then it's like, okay, cool. Now let's kind of, you guys run with it. Kind of build that into the life of the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple more quick questions. You've done a lot of traveling, and what would you say is like your maybe most surprising or most enjoyable country that you've led worship in? Like, what's the place where you go, oh, that was amazing, and I wasn't expecting that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So last year we went to Qatar. It was actually the second time that we've been there. We're in Doha. Yeah. And we're there. The plan was we were just going to do this big outdoor worship night, and which we'd done a couple of years prior, which was still, and even that one a few years back was like such a highlight. Yeah. And so we had this whole trip planned, and I think we did it in November. Sorry, my family's just walking in. Sorry about that.
That's good. Keeping it
so
real.
We're doing, yeah. So yes, but then what happened was right before we went out to Qatar, we got asked to do like a bit of a worship night on this airbase out in the desert, and I kind of threw the idea out to Gary. I was like, I kind of tried to sell it. I was like, I think it'll be cool. Not really known kind of what it would be like. And it was the day after we did the big event, and this was kind of the opposite of what the night before. It was like an army air base. It's one of the biggest air bases in the Middle East, And so there's like 10,000 troops out there. And so we went and did it. We, had all our gear, and there was maybe like 200 people, that were there, that were gathered. And it was the chaplain that kind of organized the whole thing, an American guy. And it was one of the most special nights that I've ever been a part of. And you can see everyone just like trying to hide behind. Sorry.
Yeah, didn't see him at all.
Yeah. And it was just one of the most special nights. Actually, this cap was from the air base.
Oh, there you go.
And every time I wear it, I'm just kind of reminded of that night.
Yeah.
And we led worship for some of these soldiers, and who have seen the most horrendous things, and just really broken people. And as we were chatting to the chaplain, just kind of even talking to some of the soldiers, just hearing their stories, it was kind of mind blowing of kind of what these guys go through. And when we came to the night, it was so different to anything else that we've done as like on tour or worship night anywhere. And it just felt, we just felt like we had to create just space for, just to minister. It's kind of let the Holy Spirit, let God do bring healing. Yeah. And, the chaplain was telling us that one of the biggest issues that they deal with is actually suicide within the soldiers, just because of all the brokenness that people kind of hold on to and have within them. And so we kind of went into the night knowing this.
Right.
And it was so memorable. People could do whatever they wanted. Like there was no pretense about it. There's no show about it. Yeah. Not that there is on other nights, but it was just such a different atmosphere and a different space that we were creating. And the end of the night, the whole team was just like, I can't believe we actually got to do that.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing. And that the chaplain and the soldiers are like thanking us. We were chatting to them, and we're like, no, like, thank you for like letting us do this, because this was hands down one of the best things that we've ever done. And it's not always the big stuff that's always the most memorable. And it was such an incredible night. And I think, we all walked away changed, I guess, because of being part of that night. And so, it was amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's cool. I think probably most people would be saying, oh yeah, when we were in this field full of 30,000 people, that's because that's a lot of our human way of measuring things, like, are we doing the right thing, success, all that sort of stuff. And well, not just human, but our Western mindset as well is like, bigger is better. But yeah, it's just really cool hearing stories like that, where you're like, no, actually the presence of God moving in people's hearts, that's what's amazing. And that's brilliant to hear. So very final question, Jay. You talked at the start about the 20-year-old Jay traveling down to London and sort of being awoken to what God would want to do through his church. And if you bumped into your 20-year-old self on the street, what would be the one piece of advice you'd want to give to yourself?
Wow. I would probably just say stay the course, because there's so many things along the journey which can knock you off and that can take you out, and which I've seen within my own friends as well. It's people who started out on the journey who are no longer on the journey now.
Yeah. And
that's what I'd say. I was just like, just stay the course, trusting God, and keep that as the prize. It's not about any of the other stuff. The other stuff is fun. It's great, and it's a privilege and honor that to get to do it. But it's not the most important thing. It's kind of, it's the extras, it's the nice stuff. But stay the course and trust in God, because he'll always come through. Always.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Jay. You've been
man.
a wonderful guest. Thank you for being with us. If you guys want to find out any more about what we've been doing, either in Worship Conversations or anything else to do with Audacious Worship, then you can go to audaciousworship.com. Follow us on Instagram, Audacious Worship. You can find all the other interviews on Audacious Worship, Instagram TV, or on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much to Jay Cook for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.